And welcome to the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and thank you for joining us. This newscast is real, in-depth, American, and I'm so glad to have you join us. And this is a special edition of the Citizen Report, actually, because I've got a new co-host for this podcast. And as you know, I've been the only host of this show for the entire history of this show, and I've only had guests in the few times I've had them, but I've never actually had a co-host officially. So I'm very blessed and honored to officially name a co-host to the Citizen Report. His name is David Heller, and he lives in Chandler, Oklahoma, and he's actually got a just as much of an interest in broadcasting as I do, if not even more in some ways. And he's a Christian, which is very good to know. So without further ado, let's bring him on, actually. His name is David Heller again, and he is the co-host of the Citizen Report. David, how are you?
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Doing excellent. I am excited and blessed that I have this opportunity to be as your co-host of the Citizen Report.
Well, I'm very blessed all the same, David, and I can tell you're going to be a great co-host. And just tell the audience a little bit. I mentioned that you were just as much into broadcasting as me, if not more in some regards. Would you just quantify that a little bit for the audience so that they get an idea of, your interest in broadcasting?
So basically what my interest in broadcasting entails is it covers anything and everything that is related to broadcasting. You can talk about things like weather broadcasting, sports broadcasting, news broadcasting, anything of a like that has to do with broadcasting in some form or another. That's exactly what I am interested in.
Awesome. And I understand that well, obviously, I actually know this. Being your friend, I know this. But would you just talk a little bit about, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, actually, if you don't mind.
So, for those of you in the audience that don't know, my name is David Heller, and as Jonathan said, I am from Chandler, Oklahoma. I am actually from the heart of what's called traditional Tornado Alley, which, for those that don't know what Tornado Alley is, that covers parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, all the way up into parts of the Dakotas and Minnesota. It is a large area for a particular severe weather area. But what Oklahoma is known for is tornadoes, and so we get those quite often here in this state. And so, as Jonathan alluded to, I am a Christian. My grandfather was a pastor at a couple of different Assemblies of God churches throughout Texas and Oklahoma, and he was a Sunday school director for the Oklahoma district until he retired in the 90s. And he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He passed away a little over 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, just after Christmas. Sadly, he passed away. And for those that don't know where Chandler is about an hour or so from Tulsa and about 45 minutes from Oklahoma City. It's that sweet spot in the middle in between the two cities. It's right along Route 66 as well, which is also known as the Mother Road. And I am also about 4 or 5 hours from the Branson-Harrison area where Jonathan grew up. And I'm sure Jonathan has mentioned a lot about Branson and Harrison, but that area is one of the most beautiful places in America. I go there quite often along with my parents, and we love it. We just love Branson, and the things that I am the most passionate about is bringing you the news of the day in a clear and concise manner that is factual and does not have any bias to it in our reporting. And we're also passionate about weather as well. And specifically in weather as well, I've had an interest in meteorology since when I was a little kid. I remember going up to the TV, just kind of pointing at the weather maps and things like that. And I also remember when I was going to school in Davenport that I used to go up on the board and draw out all of the weather maps that would happen with any weather event, anything of the like. And, that's just how I got interested in weather broadcasting and anything to do with meteorology for that matter. And then on the sports end of things, my first love, believe it or not, is NASCAR. And Jonathan obviously knows this, but since he does live in the Charlotte area, that Charlotte is the heart of NASCAR country, where all the race teams and different things like that are hubbed in and around the Charlotte metropolitan area. And then after that was when I started getting into other sports like baseball, football, basketball, and alike. My teams are the Oklahoma Sooners, the Denver Broncos, St. Louis Cardinals and Blues, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, of course, as a native Okie, of course, have to root for the Thunder. And that's a little bit about me.
Well, that's all good to hear, David. It's just fascinating that you know a lot about Branson like me, having grown up in that very area just below the border. But I want to get a little bit into I don't know how much you want to touch on this today, but to kind of fill this podcast out, do you want to get a little bit into the current state of broadcasting, or where do you want to take this exactly? I'm going to kind of let you steer it here. It's up to you what we do.
I'll go ahead and take it to the current state of broadcasting.
Okay.
Which in sense, the way the broadcasting is today is anytime you watch a nightly national newscast like NBC Nightly News, World News Tonight, and even the CBS Evening News, the one common denominator is, and especially true for ABC and NBC, is the fact that they are clearly biased toward the left and towards the Democratic Party.
Right.
But
absolutely.
It also extends down to the local level as well. Well, you have all these companies like Tegna that are essentially destroying these good stations, like, for instance, WFAA Channel 8 in Dallas-Fort Worth. That station, for those that don't know, that was the station that our favorite John B. Wells was a voiceover guy for that station for many, many, many years. He was a wonderful announcer for them.
And actually, David, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to actually just have you pause for a second, and I'm just going to play the audience an open from WFAA with his voiceover. Just so the audience can hear that. Okay, hold up just a moment. Here it is.
From WFAA TV, Channel 8, the spirit of Texas, this is News 8 at 6.
So that was an open from WFAA back in the day when John B. Wells was the voiceover. So I just wanted to give a little context. That is who we're talking about, and that's his voice actually on WFAA. And by the way, that was back in the day when a newscast open actually sounded like a newscast open compared to what certain stations have, we'll say now.
Right. And especially the ones now that have that. For those that don't know, Techno stations use a music package called Speak Clarity, which is nothing but noise. It's nothing but noise. And all that. Ooh,
Yeah. And actually, let me just let the audience hear that too. I'm just going to play a cut of that. So that was just a sampler of an open from Tegna on a certain station, we'll say. And David, just continue your thought. Whenever you say something like that, I think I can provide further context by including a soundbite. That's how I like to do it. But go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah. And so basically, the state of broadcasting in general is that everything has to be so trendy. And it's just not even a real newscast at all. Whenever I see a newscast on a Techno station, I see elements of social media, that's when I have to decide, okay, no, clicking out, going to another channel. Because we're just not going to sit there and put up with this garbage. And this is what we're not all about here with the Citizen Report. We're not going to be noise like Techno. We're not going to be that trendy. Oops, sorry about that. We're not going to be that kind of thing. We're just going to deliver facts. We're going to deliver news of the day in a clear and concise manner. And that is our goal here with the Citizen Report.
Right. And I think, though, David, to just add a little bit to that, you would say, though, that there are definitely people that at any company, and I'm not just going to single out one company, but any company that wants to go soft and trendy and not really cover news, you would agree, though, that there are those people in the companies, you might say leftovers of the old era of newscasts that definitely still want to do real news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially people, even like John McKay, who up until last year when he retired, he hung around WFAA long after Tenda took over the station.
Yeah. Yeah, and before that, Belo owned them, by the way, just for the audience to know.
Right.
And of course, it was bought into Gant, and then when the split happened with their newspaper side, they became Tegna. Kind of a rearranging of some of the letters from the Gannett name, I guess you could say.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. And that's what occurred, what will be 5 years ago this year.
Yep.
And so, these journalists are, as you said, you're spot on, Jonathan. There are still people who still work at the Techno stations today that still appreciates old school real journalism.
Yeah.
And that I have to, applaud them for that. That they still have respect and they still care about journalism.
Right. And just here's the thing. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about. Here's the thing. You said that our newscast is not going to be biased, but here's the thing. I think that I think this is something even the audience knows, at least subconsciously, that when they watch a newscast, that when they pretend to be unbiased of any kind, that what they really do is by their inclusion or exclusion of certain stories or topics or facts of those topics, that is in of itself a bias. And also the way they upplay or downplay something, they make something sound worse than it really is or better than it really is, or especially in the realm of politics or things like that. But I was just going to say too that I think that the way newscasts are going, I think it just has to be pointed out that they do distort and they are biased, and I think that I think that anytime a newscast claims to be completely unbiased, you have to wonder what they're really up to, because, they're their very bias is shown by what they do and not do on a newscast. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that's especially true with, and the NBC newscast, for example,
Yeah.
with NBC Nightly News.
MSNBC.
And right now, I can imagine they're probably biased right now in their report about the CDC right now.
And just looked at the clock, and actually they're on, it's actually the 6:34 here, so yeah, they're on the air right now, most likely.
Right.
But let me also just put this in, and I'll throw it back to you. But I was just going to say, I think that's something else about MSNBC, how they're commonly owned and, commonly branded, really, because they got the NBC logo and all that stuff. I'm trying not to offend anybody listening to this, but I just have to say that I feel like that NBC Nightly News has a tall order at best if they even attempt to be unbiased, because all you have to do is look at MSNBC, and what they really think, who they really are, is completely on full display, because they just don't even try to be objective. And I'm not being a hypocrite in saying that, because I'm very transparent on what I think or feel about a certain topic. But my point being is that when you pretend to be unbiased, that's where the problems are.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you're absolutely spot on in that. And I could even flip over to ABC as well, and I can guarantee you, and guarantee the viewers that they're going to be biased in their reporting. Same thing with CBS. They're all going to be biased in some way or another toward the left.
Right.
That's what they are.
But, here's the thing. And I know we're going down a rabbit hole of sorts, but, you just feel free to just interject and tell me how much you want to go into something or not go into something. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to just kind of get into, before we're done, we're not going to do too much with this episode, by the way, folks. We're just kind of we've introduced David, and we're just getting a kind of touching the surface about broadcasting in its current form. But one thing I'll say is that another thing too is that the bias on the national level is, it's like, you all might remember from Project Veritas how ABC News, I believe the anchor woman's name is Amy Robach. I think, I'll have to verify that, but I believe that's her name. And she basically admitted on open mic in front of a camera, when she was like on this off-air feed that apparently went out and or at least was recorded inside ABC or something, where she basically admitted that they had the facts on Jeffrey Epstein for a long time, but they would not run it because they got threatened, basically, by, well, I won't say their name, but a certain something of a I don't know what you call it, a political hierarchy in a certain country in Europe. I'm not going to say their name, but y'all probably can figure it out, but especially if y'all go back and listen to that tape. But my point being is that there's so clearly a bias in the media, and it goes beyond, it transcends politics. It goes into other things too. It's just like the very decision making on including or not including a story, or running a story and not running a story. There are powers that be that decide what they consider worthwhile for you to watch as news. And I think that's a problem when you don't even know who it is that makes these decisions. I think that's a very big problem. And I think that media companies need to either be completely transparent about where they stand on topics, or they need to be true to their word and being unbiased. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think everybody, and even us as well, we all must be able to, show that we are capable of telling the truth, and that we are going to be straightforward in our reporting, and that we're going to keep our biases to as minimal as possible, and even perhaps not even show bias at all, if at all possible.
Right. But again, I think that the problem being is that where you have these newscasts, and they they basically say that, well, I'm just going to say it, like they say that President Trump may have done this, and yet there's no evidence of it, and yet they report it like it's this doom and gloom situation, that there's damning information on Trump. I think that, and when there's really not, by the way. And I think, it's like these kind of biases, that is where the problems are, because from these newscasts are where a lot of people make their decisions on a lot of things, including who they vote for, and I think that's a serious issue.
Absolutely. That in itself is, a very serious problem in broadcasting today, in general, and we'll wrap up the topic about broadcasting in this way, and I'll say this:
okay,
the way people see broadcasting today is not the kind of broadcasting that my parents or your parents or their grandparents or what have you grew up with, because everybody from Lester Holt to David Muir to Nora O'Donnell, they're all biased toward the left in their reporting.
Well, I mean, like George Stephanopoulos, I've told you this in just private conversations, David, that George Stephanopoulos, who's considered, at least at last check, to be the chief anchor at ABC News, he was a Clinton operative.
That's correct.
And so I'm not saying that. Look, personally, how I feel is this: is that it's not so much the bias, it's actually the fact that they masquerade their bias as fact. They don't say, this is my opinion or this is my position and we want you to think a certain way. They just try to masquerade it and manipulate by trying to upplay certain facts and downplay others.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
And so we're I think it's going to be a good point here to wrap up this podcast here. And for those that want to connect with me, feel free to reach out to me or to Jonathan on Facebook. You can also reach to us on Twitter at the Jonathan News, and then I'm at David Heller 9, and then also Instagram as well. And feel free to reach out to us via email. I'm david.heller.12505 at gmail.com. And if you have any suggestions for how we can improve the podcast, please feel free to reach out to one or both of us, and we'll be happy to reply back to you as quickly as possible.
Alrighty, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. I enjoyed this conversation, David. I look forward to doing many podcasts with you, and I think this podcast has a good future. I really do.
Absolutely, and I think that the viewers are going to really enjoy what we're going to do.
Yes.
We got some exciting things that we have planned in store for the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be doing in April with the special about autism. And for those that don't know that about this, I am on the autism spectrum, which is known as Asperger's, which is a form of autism. And so we are going to be doing specials on that. And then also coming up this April 19th, and we'll see what Jonathan thinks of this, but we might even do a special edition of the Citizen Report for the 25th anniversary of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building that took place in downtown Oklahoma City,
Right.
Oklahoma.
And for those who don't, know, that was a terrorist act done in, I believe, 1995. Correct, David?
1995. That is correct.
So yeah, it'll be 25 years on this year, and absolutely, there's a lot of things in store, and not just topic wise, but also in terms of technology, or I say technology, I really mean like features of the podcast. I'll just go ahead and say I am planning, early stages of thinking about this, about doing a website, but I won't get any more into that because I really just don't know yet what we're going to do with that. But there's a lot of things we can do with this podcast, and I really look forward to exploring a number of these options.
Absolutely, and that, and also we're also going to have specials as well, especially with regards to severe weather and as well as hurricane season. I think the viewers are going to really enjoy what we have in store coming up for the Citizen Report.
Okay, awesome. Is there any final? We're coming to the end of the show now. Is there any final words you'd like to say to the audience in terms of, just anything, any closing remarks you'd like to make in general? It could be anything.
Yeah. I want to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in and to listening to this podcast. I hope that you got something out of it as much as we did.
Right.
And that I hope that everybody has a blessed and good rest of their evening and a blessed weekend.
Absolutely.
And we'll see them next time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. God bless you all, and may God bless the United States of America.
That's a very good way. That's a very good closing way to close your remarks. I like that. Alrighty. This has been good, David. I as I said earlier, I look forward to doing many shows with you. And I like to thank all of you for tuning in to the Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next show. We don't yet have a firm schedule yet, but we'll probably get one made at some point. So with that said, thank you again for tuning in to the Citizen Report, where this newscast is real, in-depth, American. We'll see you again on the next show. Have a great evening.
The Citizen Report is a production of New Shannon Media. All content protected under copyright.